Listen to me very carefully, because what I'm about to tell you is going to affect every single person watching this video right now. Whether you own a home, whether you're trying to buy a home, whether you're renting, this matters to you. America has a real estate problem, and it's not just serious. It's catastrophic. And before I get into the numbers, before I show you exactly why this is going to hit your wall harder than anything you've seen in decades, I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button right now. Smash it, because if you care about your money, if you care about building wealth, you need to be part of this community. We tell you the truth here. No sugarcoating, no nonsense, just facts and money. Now let's get into it. I've been in business for over 40 years. I've built companies. I've invested hundreds of millions of dollars. I've seen markets crash and I've seen markets boom. And I'm telling you right now what's happening in American real estate is unlike anything I've witnessed in my entire career. We are staring down the barrel of a crisis that most people don't even see coming. But I see it. And by the end of this video, you're going to see it too. Here's the reality. The American dream has always been about one thing: owning your own home. You work hard. You save your money. You buy a house. You build equity, and you pass something on to your kids. That's how it's supposed to work. That's how my generation did it. That's how your parents probably did it. But for millions of young Americans today, that dream is dead. And it's not because they're lazy. It's not because they're spending too much on coffee. It's because the system is broken. Let me give you some numbers, because numbers don't lie. The median home price in America right now is sitting around 7 times the median household income. 7 times. You know what it was in the early 2000s? About 4 times. You know what it was in the 1970s? About 2.5 times. Do you see the pattern here? Housing has become completely disconnected from what people actually earn. And when you disconnect price from income, you create a bubble. And bubbles always burst. But here's what makes this different from 2008. Back then, we had a subprime mortgage crisis. Banks were giving loans to people who couldn't afford them. The whole system was built on junk. When it collapsed, it was ugly. But at least we knew what the problem was. Bad loans. This time, the problem is supply. We don't have enough houses. We're not building enough houses, and the houses we do have are being bought up by people and entities that have no intention of living in them. Let me explain something to you about supply and demand, because this is basic economics. But apparently nobody in Washington understands it. When you have more buyers than you have houses, prices go up. That's just math. And right now in America, we have millions of people who want to buy homes, but we don't have the inventory. We're short by millions of units. Some estimates say we need to build 5 million new homes just to catch up to where we should be, 5 million. And we're not even close to building at that pace. Why aren't we building? Great question. Let me tell you. First, it's too expensive. The cost of materials went through the roof. Lumber, steel, concrete. Everything got more expensive. The businessly labor got more expensive. And when your input costs go up, your final product gets more expensive. So even if builders want to build affordable housing, they can't, because the math doesn't work. They can't make money on it. Second, regulations. I'm not saying we don't need building codes. I'm not saying we don't need safety standards, but in many cities and states, the regulatory burden is so heavy, so slow, so expensive that it adds years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to every project. You've got zoning laws that were written 50 years ago that don't make sense anymore. You've got environmental reviews that take forever. You've got local politicians who say they want affordable housing, but then they block every development in their district because they don't want it in their backyard. And third, land. In the cities where people actually want to live, where the jobs are, there's no land left, and the land that is available costs a fortune. So developers are stuck. They can't build where people want to live because it's too expensive. And if they build where it's cheap, nobody wants to move there because there are no jobs. So what do we get? We get a market where supply can't keep up with demand. And when that happens, prices explode. And that's exactly what we've been watching for the last several years. Now, let me tell you who's winning in this environment. It's not the young couple trying to buy their first home. It's not the family trying to upgrade to a bigger place. It's the investors. It's the institutions. It's the people and companies who have cash in, can outbid everyone else. I'm talking about private equity firms. I'm talking about hedge funds. I'm talking about foreign investors. They see American real estate as a safe place to park their money, and they're buying up properties by the thousands. And here's the kicker. Many of these investors aren't even renting these places out. They're just holding them. They're treating houses like stocks. Buy it, hold it, wait for it to appreciate, sell it. Meanwhile, the house sits empty. So now you've got a shortage of homes, and on top of that, you've got homes that are being taken off the market entirely just so someone can use them as a financial asset. It's insane. This is creating a generation of renters. People who would have been homeowners 30 years ago are now stuck renting because they can't afford to buy. And renting isn't cheap either. Rent has gone up almost as fast as home prices. So you've got people paying $2,000 a month in rent. Money that's just gone. It's not building equity. It's not building wealth. It's just making someone else rich. And let me tell you what this does to an economy. When people can't afford to buy homes, they don't spend money on the things that come with home ownership. They don't buy furniture. They don't buy appliances. They don't hire contractors. They don't invest in their communities. Home ownership is the foundation of middle-class wealth in this country. And when you take that away, you hollow out the middle class. I look at young people today, people in their 20s and 30s, and I see them working hard, doing everything right, and they still can't get ahead. They've got student loans. They've got car payments. They've got credit card debt. And now they're being told that if they want to buy a house, they need to save up $100,000 for a down payment. Where are they supposed to get that? It's not realistic. This is why I'm so fired up about this issue. This isn't just about real estate. This is about the future of this country. If we don't fix this, we're going to have an entire generation that never builds wealth. And when people can't build wealth, they get angry. They get frustrated. They lose faith in the system. And that's dangerous. Now, let me tell you where this gets really ugly, because what I just described to you is bad enough. But there's another layer to this that most people don't understand. And it's this layer that's going to determine whether America remains a land of opportunity or becomes a country of landlords and tenants. We need to talk about who's making money off this crisis and why the people in charge aren't doing anything to stop it. Let's start with the investors I mentioned. When I say institutional investors are buying up homes, I'm not talking about mom and pop landlords who own a couple rental properties. I'm talking about massive corporations with billions of dollars. These companies have a strategy, and it's brilliant from a business perspective, but it's terrible for regular Americans. They go into markets. They identify undervalued properties or markets that are about to grow, and they buy everything they can get their hands on. They pay cash. They close fast, and they outbid families every single time. Why can they do this? Because they have access to cheap capital. They can borrow money at rates that you and I could never get. They've got relationships with banks. They've got investors. And they can afford to lose money on individual properties because they're playing the long game. They're building portfolios of thousands of homes. And once they own enough homes in a market, they have pricing power. They can set the rent. They can dictate terms. It's monopoly, except it's real life and real people are getting squeezed. And here's what makes me angry. These companies are doing this with the blessing of our financial system. Banks love these deals because they're lending huge amounts of money. Wall Street loves these deals because they can package these rental incomes into securities and sell them to investors. Everybody's making money except the people who actually need a place to live. I want you to understand something. I'm a capitalist. I believe in free markets. I believe in making money. But I also believe that markets have to work for everyone, not just the people at the top. And when you have a situation where the average person can't compete because the game is rigged in favor of institutions, that's not capitalism. That's something else. And it's not sustainable. Let me give you a real example. There are neighborhoods and cities across America where 30, 40, 50% of the homes are owned by investors. Think about what that does to a community. When half the neighborhood is rentals, you don't have the same investment in the community. People move in and out. There's no stability. Nobody's taking care of the properties the way an owner would. The whole character of the neighborhood changes. And the people who do homes in that neighborhood, their property values get affected. It's a downward spiral. Now, let's talk about interest rates, because this is where the Federal Reserve comes in. For years, we had interest rates near zero. That was great if you were borrowing money. It was terrible if you were trying to save money. But that's a different conversation. And those low rates made it incredibly cheap to borrow money to buy real estate. So what happened? Everyone who could borrow did borrow. Investors borrowed. Individuals borrowed. Prices went up and up and up because money was cheap. Then inflation hit, and the Fed had to raise rates to try to cool down the economy. Now we've got mortgage rates that are 3 times higher than they were just a few years ago. And that's created a whole new problem. People who bought homes when rates were low are locked in. They've got mortgages at 3%, 3.5%. They're not selling because if they sell and buy another house, they're going to get a mortgage at 7 or 8%. So they're staying put. That means even less inventory on the market. So now you got high prices and low inventory and high interest rates all at the same time. It's the perfect storm. If you're trying to buy a house right now, you're getting crushed from every direction. The house costs more than it should. There are barely any houses available. And the cost to borrow the money is astronomical. It's almost impossible. And let me tell you who this hurts the most. It hurts first-time buyers. It hurts young families. It hurts people who are trying to move up from a small apartment to a house where they can raise their kids. These are the people who are being locked out of the market. And meanwhile, the investors who already own property, they're sitting pretty. Their assets are appreciating. They're collecting rent. They're making money hand over fist. This brings me to the policy side of things. And this is where I really start to lose my mind, because we have politicians who stand up and say they care about affordable housing. They give speeches. They make promises. But when it comes time to actually do something, they do nothing. Or worse, they do things that make a problem worse. Let me give you some examples. You've got cities that have rent control. Now, I understand why people think rent control is a good idea. They see rents going up and they want to protect tenants. But here's what actually happens with rent control. Landlords stop investing in their properties because they can't raise the rent to cover their costs. Developers stop building new rental housing because they can't make money on it. So you end up with less housing, not more. It's basic economics. But politicians ignore it because it's not popular to tell people that rent control doesn't work. Then you got zoning laws. I mentioned this before, but let me dig deeper. In most American cities, the majority of residential land is zoned for single, family homes only. You can't build an apartment building. You can't build a duplex. You can't build anything except one house on one lot. That made sense maybe 70 years ago when cities were smaller. But today, when we need density, when we need more housing in the places where people want to live, these laws are killing us. And who fights to keep these zoning laws in place? Homeowners. People who already own property don't want more housing built near them because they think it will lower their property values or change the character of their neighborhood. So they show up at city council meetings and they block new developments. And the politicians listen to them because they vote. Meanwhile, the people who need housing, the young people, the renters, they're not organized. They're not showing up to these meetings. So their voices don't get heard. This is what I mean when I say the system is broken. The incentives are all wrong. The people who have power benefit from keeping housing scarce. The people who need housing don't have power, and nothing changes. Let me tell you what needs to happen. And I'm going to be blunt here. We need to build. We need to build millions of homes. We need to make it easier to build, faster to build, cheaper to build. That means cutting red tape. That means reforming zoning laws. That means investing in infrastructure so that we can develop new areas. That means getting the government out of the way in some places and getting the government more involved. In other places, I know that sounds contradictory, but here's what I mean. The government needs to stop blocking development with unnecessary regulations. But the government also needs to invest in things like roads, water systems, public transportation, the kind of infrastructure that makes it possible to build new communities. Private developers can't do that on their own. It requires public investment. We also need to have an honest conversation about who gets to buy residential real estate in TH. Is country. I'm not saying we should ban foreign investment. I'm not saying we should ban institutional investors, but maybe we need some guardrails. Maybe there should be limits on how much a neighborhood can be owned by investors. Maybe there should be tax incentives for first-time home buyers and tax penalties for entities that are buying up homes just to flip them or leave them empty. I know some people are going to call that government overreach. They're going to say the market should decide. But let me tell you something. The market is deciding. And what it's deciding is that regular people lose. So maybe we need to tip the scales back a little bit in favor of the people who actually want to live in these homes. Here's the bottom line. We are at a crossroads. We can continue down this path where housing becomes more and more expensive, where ownership becomes something only the wealthy can achieve, where an entire generation is locked out of building wealth, or we can make some hard choices. We can change policies. We can prioritize housing the way we prioritize other critical issues, but it requires leadership. And right now, I don't see that leadership. So what happens if we don't fix this? What does America look like in 10 years? 20 years if we continue on this trajectory? Let me paint you a picture, and I promise you, you're not going to like it. But you need to hear it, because this is where we're headed if we don't change course right now. Imagine America where home ownership is something only the upper class can afford, where the middle class, the backbone of this country, has been reduced to permanent renters, where your kids and grandkids will never own a home, no matter how hard they work. That's not some dystopian fantasy. That's the reality we're creating right now with the choices we're making today. When home ownership rates decline, wealth inequality explodes. And I'm not talking about some abstract economic concept. I'm talking about real wealth that determines whether your kids can go to college, whether you can retire with dignity, whether you have something to pass on to the next generation. For most Americans, their home is their biggest asset. It's how they build wealth. Take that away and you've got nothing. You've got people working their entire lives and ending up with zero net worth. Let me break down the math for you, because math doesn't lie. Let's say you're renting and you're paying$2,000 a month. Over 30 years, you're going to pay $720,000 in rent. And at the end of those 30 years, you own nothing. Zero. Now, let's say you buy a house with a mortgage. You're paying roughly the same amount every month, maybe a little more when you factor in property taxes and maintenance. But at the end of 30 years, you own an asset, and that asset has likely appreciated in value. Even if we assume modest appreciation, you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity. That's the difference between wealth and poverty and retirement. But here's what's even more insidious about this crisis. When people can't afford to buy homes, they can't afford to have families. I'm serious about this. Go look at the data. Birth rates are declining in America. People are getting married later. They're having fewer kids. And when you ask them why, one of the top reasons is financial insecurity. They can't afford a house, so they can't afford to have children. They're living in one-bedroom apartments, or with roommates well into their 30s. This has massive implications for our economy, for our society, for our future. Who's going to pay into Social Security when there aren't enough young workers? Who's going to buy all the goods and services that keep our economy running? Who's going to take care of the aging population? We're creating a demographic time bomb, and nobody wants to talk about it. Now, let me tell you about the social consequences, because this isn't just about money. When you have a society where a small number of people own everything and everyone else is just scraping by, you breed resentment. You breed anger. People lose faith in the system. They start to believe that the game is rigged. And honestly, they're not wrong. The game is rigged right now. I've been to countries where this is the reality, where there's a small, wealthy elite and everyone else struggles. And let me tell you, those are not stable societies. Those are places where crime is high, where trust is low, where people don't believe in their institutions. Is that what we want for America? Because that's where we're going if we don't wake up. And here's the thing that really gets me. This is all preventable. This isn't like a natural disaster where we have no control. This is a man-made crisis. We created this through bad policies, through regulatory capture, through putting the interests of few ahead of the interests of the many. And that means we can fix it, but only if we have the will. So let me tell you what you need to do. And I'm talking to you, the person watching this video right now. First, educate yourself. Don't just take my word for it. Go look at the data. Understand what's happening in your local market. Knowledge is power, and you need to know what you're up against. Second, if you're in a position to buy, do it. I know it's expensive. I know it feels overwhelming. But if you can find a way to get into the market, even if it's a small condo or a house in a less desirable neighborhood, do it. Because the alternative is renting forever, and that's financial suicide. Build equity while you can. Even if you have to make sacrifices in the short term, it will pay off in the long term. Third, if you're locked out of the market, don't give up. Start saving aggressively. Cut your expenses. Get a side hustle. Do whatever it takes to build up a down payment. I know it feels impossible, but I've seen people do it. It requires discipline and sacrifice, but it's possible. And look into programs for first-time home buyers. There are grants. There are low-interest loans. There are programs that can help. You have to do your homework, but the resources are out there. Fourth, and this is critical, get involved politically. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever. This issue should unite all of us because it affects all of us. Start showing up to your city council meetings. Start asking your representatives what they're doing about housing. Vote for candidates who have real plans to increase housing supply. Hold them accountable. Politicians respond to pressure, but only if we apply it. We need to demand that our leaders reform zoning laws. We need to demand that they streamline the permitting process. We need to demand that they invest in infrastructure. We need to demand that they create incentives for building affordable housing. And we need to demand that they put guardrails on the institutional investors who are distorting the market. I'm not naive. I know that changing policy is hard. I know there are entrenched interests that benefit from the status quo. But we have numbers on our side. There are millions of Americans who are being hurt by this crisis. If we organize, if we speak with one voice, we can force change. But it starts with you. It starts with people deciding that they're not going to accept this anymore. Now, let me talk to the homeowners watching this video. I know some of you might be thinking, well, my house has gone up in value, so this is good for me. And yes, on paper, you're wealthier. But let me ask you something. Do you have kids? Do you have grandkids? Because they're the ones getting screwed by this. Your home equity doesn't mean much if your children can never afford to buy their own homes. Think about what kind of world you're leaving for them. And think about your community. Do you want to live in a neighborhood where everyone is a renter? Where people are constantly moving in and out? Where nobody is a stake in making the community better? That's what happens when home ownership becomes unaffordable. Your property value might go up in the short term, but the quality of life goes down. We need homeowners to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. That means supporting new housing development, even if it's in your backyard. That means recognizing that we need density. We need more units, and that's not a threat to your lifestyle. It's how we make sure the next generation has a shot. Let me wrap this up because I know I've thrown a lot at you. Here's what you need to remember. America is facing a real estate crisis that threatens the very foundation of middle-class prosperity. Prices are too high, supply is too low, and the people in charge aren't doing enough to fix it. If we don't act now, we're going to create a permanent renter class. We're going to hollow out the middle class, and we're going to fundamentally change what it means to be American. But it doesn't have to be this way. We can fix this. We can build more housing. We can make it more affordable. We can make sure that the American dream of home ownership is still achievable for the next generation. but it requires all of us to get involved. It requires us to demand change. It requires us to hold our leaders accountable. This channel is about telling you the truth about money, about business, about the economy, and the truth is we're in trouble. But I believe in this country. I believe in the American people. And I believe that when we recognize a problem, we have the ability to solve.